Hello, and welcome to the Lucidez podcast, where I explore everything because I believe everything is connected to everything else. And I also believe in the infinite, unbounded potential within each of us. Today I'm here in front of my fireplace, and I wanted to stand here because I have 3 new additions since my mother's passing, gifts from her when my siblings and I got together and went through this stuff. These are 3 of the things I'm able to bring home this lovely gentleman, and he's in a shroud. This shroud actually came from the Dalai Lama. His niece knew I loved Buddhas. This was probably at least 20 years ago. And so when she went back to visit the Dalai Lama, she had him bless a Buddha, and she wrapped it in this beautiful white shroud. So this is the shroud. The Buddha is actually at my son's house. It's been there for a while. He very much wants it there, needs it. This beautiful piece of driftwood that was hers, and then this beautiful bust right here of this man. So these are new additions. And what I wanted to talk about, because I believe it's an important understanding, because it's been an important experience in my life. I've tried to explain this before, and I don't believe I've been successful. I feel like today I finally have the words and the metaphor or analogy. It's a metaphor that's going to help, but it's actually, for me, it's not a metaphor. I actually believe it's true. And that is that grief is water. So I'm going to use a water metaphor today, which I think is actually 100% true. And when I say grief is water, if grief is water, then it means that joy is also water. So there's a duality. I believe there's a duality in all things in this realm. And so for me, water is both grief and joy. So let's say that you have these streams of water, and they're coming from different sources, but they all kind of drain into this one depression, let's say a pond of some sort. And for whatever reason, this pond is suddenly given an outlet, and the water starts to rush out. Now imagine all those streams that have come in and filled this depression, this pond. Well, all of those waters are going to come out, right? It's not like just one of those streams, the water from one of the streams is going to go out. No, all of the streams have come down into this depression, this pond, and they're all going to rush out when, that opening is made. I believe that's how grief works. Meaning, let's say I have a grief about the rape. Let's just pretend I do. So I don't. Let's say I have a grief about the rape. I have a grief about certain things in my family. I have a grief about, certain things in my friend life, or a grief about the loss of my mom. Maybe still some grief about the loss of my dad when he died of Alzheimer's, or, like all these different streams of grief. And some are bigger than others, but they all kind of drain into this depression, this energetic depression, this pond. And now that my mom has passed and there's an opening, it's like my mom's passing was powerful enough to sort of like force an opening in this pond, in this depression, and allow a release. And so all of these griefs are now moving through and washing through and washing away. Why is that important? Because if I were just grieving my mom, I might try to put a limit to it. Like, I only feel this much grief for the loss of my mom, or I only should feel this much grief, or, whatever. Like, I might try to put the limit to it, which I believe is so not the way grief wants to work. Grief wants to flow. And I don't think it cares the story or the source. It's just like, it is time to flow. So for me, for whatever reason, there's been a lot of peace for me in my mom's passing. And so when I think about my mom's passing, there isn't a lot of grief. I feel like I'm in this incredibly kind of angsty transformation phase where I'm going to get to a place where I think I'm actually going to be able to communicate with her better than I ever was when she was alive. And so there's an anticipation for me. I'm actually looking forward to what's next. That said, my mother's passing, there is some grief, and it was a powerful enough force that it pushed like a hole in my depression, in my grief pond, so to speak. And so I am feeling the grief of so many other things in my life right now. And I can feel sort of, but it doesn't, I'm not trying to name it. It just comes up as suddenly like, oh, the grief about that. And I just say, yes, let it flow. Like your grief pond has been opened, let it flow. Like this, even though my mom has just passed, this isn't like the time to grieve my mom, it's the time to grieve. And so I just offer, and this comes from an experience I had many years ago where I realized that the grief I was having was bigger than the one incident, that I thought I was grieving this one incident. And then something in me was like, no, you're grieving this and this. Yes, you're grieving this one incident, but there's all these other griefs that are happening alongside it, and just grieve. And so I believe it's a gift that when an event happens where there is a loss great enough in our life that it punches a hole in that, that sort of depression that's been holding the grief for us, not to, obviously name it if the name comes up, but not to try to put parameters on how much you should or could or do grieve. And just for the one event, like grieve. Let all the streams of grief just wash away. And I believe that's the beauty of the powerful cleansing. And I think that's part of what my mom was saying in her journal, where, she's releasing these waters, she's releasing this flood. It's like the flood of cleansing and the flood of grieving and the flood of renewal, which grief is all of these things. Sorrow is, for me, like one of the most beautiful gifts we've ever been given. Her ability to cleanse, there's nothing like it for me, and renew and bring about, when the waters of joy, right? The waters of grief, the waters of joy. And there are times in this where there is like this, there are moments where I'm just like, this grief is so great, and there is such joy that I can grieve, and that I do grieve, and that I can express. And sometimes I understand what's going on in this process, and sometimes I'm so confused. Like I literally, as I've been describing to friends, I said I feel like a snow globe. Sometimes someone shakes it up and sets it down, and then there's another day where they never set it down. It's just shaking, 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 shaking. And one of my other girlfriends who recently lost her husband, she started using it too, and she says, I feel like someone just busted my snow globe, and it's just draining everywhere today. So grief is complex in one way, because its sources can be numerous, and we can't even always understand where it came from. But at the same time, grief is so simple in that it just wants to move. It insists. When that opening is finally made, there is no stopping the waters. And so to allow all of it that can move to move is like our greatest job, is our gift, is our job, is our responsibility. But that's an experience for sure. And in my previous podcast that I just did, the sorrow, grief, loss, part 2, those are some of my new experiences and understanding of grief, as well as some of my sort of reflections of watching other people grieve. Some of them I have not experienced personally, but in watching other people grieve recently, I've been like, oh, this is sort of their experience. I'm obviously it's me, but it seems to me this is what they're experiencing with grief. So they're both my experiences, reflections, insights about grief. But so that is something I just wanted to share. If and when you find yourself in a place of loss, should you sometime in your life find yourself in a place of loss, and you feel the grief, and maybe the grief is confusing or overwhelming, maybe it feels bigger than it should, allow it to be as big as it is, and understand that you may be grieving many streams of loss. at one time, and that is sacred. So, love to y'all, and good luck.